Greetings, people. This is the Mexican American channel. You are welcome to join us. Hit the like button to support the channel and subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet.
This is not the first time people of Mexican descent have been demonized, accused of stealing jobs, and forced to leave the country. During the Great Depression of the 1930s, more than 1 million people residing in the United States were deported to Mexico. Some estimate as much as 60% of them were U.S. citizens of Mexican descent.
In 2003, then California State Senator Joe Dunn held hearings in Sacramento where survivors gave testimony about what happened to them during the forced expulsions, which the government called repatriations. This is Senator Dunn stressing the importance of the hearing.
The idea from which this nation was born was the promise to all of liberty and justice. Today we examine a tragic part of American history where we betrayed the justice part of that promise. And a betrayal that affected a staggering number of individuals. By some estimates, almost 2 million individuals were deported from the United States in the 1930s. Some estimate that almost 60% of those that were deported were United States citizens. And they were deported for but one reason. They just happened to be of Mexican descent.
The state of California went on to issue a formal apology for its role in the expulsions and built a memorial in downtown Los Angeles to commemorate the victims. But many fear that history is now on the verge or repeating itself already. For more, we're going to Los Angeles, California, where we're joined by the preeminent scholar on this often overlooked chapter of American history, Francisco Valderrama, professor of American history and Chicano studies at California State University, Los Angeles. He's the co-author of the book, Decade of Betrayal, Mexican Repatriation in the 1930s. Professor Valderrama, thank you so much for joining us. I think for many, especially young people, but I'm sure many more, do not know this chapter of American history. Can you lay it out for us, what actually happened?
You're right that it's largely not known, and that's in the larger American society, the Mexican nation, as well as in the Mexican community itself. That this occurred during the Great Depression, a period of vast unemployment and underemployment, that at least over 1 million. Joe Dunn thinks in terms of maybe almost 2 million individuals, Mexican nationals and American citizens of Mexican descent were swept up and expelled out of this country. And it covered the entire United States, from Alabama and Mississippi to Alaska, from Los Angeles to New York. This mass expulsion occurred. And of a population that included Mexican nationals, many of them that had lived in this country 20, 30 years. But increasingly important is the 60% or more of American citizens of Mexican descent. In other words, what occurred here was unconstitutional deportation.
Well, Professor Valderrama, I'm wondering if you could talk also about the role of the press at that time in stirring up anti-immigrant fervor, because this began during the Hoover administration and then moved on into the Roosevelt administration. What was the role of the press as well?
Well, the role of the press is significant, but it is also reflecting the larger American society at this time as well. The key notion that the press puts forward is that a Mexican is a Mexican. There is no distinction in terms of residence in this country. As I mentioned earlier, many of them had lived in this country 20, 25 years. Most of them were documented. Most of them had papers. And that their children that were born in this country were U.S. citizens. No distinctions made. And that is accepted in this society and serves as a way of looking at the population that even though they had contributed during better times to the economic prosperity of the United States, that now that's not recognized. They are the other, so to speak.
I want to turn to Ignacio Pina, who lived in rural Idaho when sheriffs came to his house and took everybody in custody in the summer of 1931. His parents had lived in the United States for some 25 years. He was about to enter first grade. We're taking this from a film called A Forgotten Injustice. A now elderly Pina describes what happened that day.
My mother was cooking and hand-making flour tortillas. I remember we were eating them with melted butter. Then all of a sudden they arrived. They pointed their guns at us. One officer was standing outside, the other one was inside, and they said, "Come on, let's go, come on." And my mother would ask, "Where?" "No questions, come on, out."
No question, come on, out.
They took us to the fields where my father was working. They grabbed him too, and then they filled up the other car with Mexicans that were working there as well. In Pocatello, Idaho, they put us in jail. We were in jail for 6 or 7 days. I was 6 years old, and as a kid I could not understand why we were in jail if we were not criminals. My father was in one cell and my mother was in another, one with me, my 3 sisters, and my 2 brothers. But I could not understand why. Even when we were in the train on our way to El Paso, Texas, I wondered, where is this train going? What's going to happen with us? There were about 5 cars with lots of Mexicans, lots of families. We were so young, but I remember looking around at the people. They looked so sad. Because many were suffering the same things we were facing. They were kicked out too. They did it so we couldn't come back, even the ones that were born here like us. They didn't let us take anything with us, not even our birth certificates.
Not even our birth certificates. That was Ignacio Pina.
The Great Depression was a severe worldwide economic downturn that began in 1929 with the U.S. stock market crash and lasted until the late 1930s, marked by high unemployment, peaking at 25% in the U.S., drastic drops in industrial production, and widespread bank failures, caused by factors like the 1929 crash, banking panics, and trade policies. It led to immense poverty, homelessness, and a fundamental shift in the government's role in the economy through programs like the New Deal. A speculative bubble burst, wiping out billions. A series of bank failures wiped out savings and restricted credit. The gold standard and the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act led to a collapse in international trade. Millions lost homes and farms, leading to makeshift shanty towns called Hoovervilles. Farmers suffered from drastically falling crop prices and foreclosures, worsened by the Dust Bowl. When white America catches a cold, Mexican Americans get pneumonia. Unemployment skyrocketed, and the Hoover administration quickly targeted immigrants as the scapegoats for a tanked economy. Hoover endorsed policies to restrict immigration and backed efforts to expel migrant families living in the U.S. Mexicans were the focus of these efforts, in part because they were the easiest to remove. During the economic and political crises of the 1920s and 1930s, the Border Patrol launched several campaigns to detain Mexicans, including some U.S.-born citizens, and expel them across the border. Immigration from Mexico to the United States had increased significantly in the years following the Mexican Revolution, which started in 1910 and continued for at least the next decade. Calls for repatriation of immigrants had begun even before the stock market crash of 1929. The ensuing years saw unemployment levels reach as high as 25%, leaving many men and women unable to support themselves or their families. With the scarcity of jobs came distrust of immigrants, or even those citizens perceived as such, and a heightened sense that they were stealing jobs from rightful citizens. The government body behind the repatriation was the Bureau of Immigration, which operated under the auspices of the Department of Commerce and Labor from 1903 to 1933, at which time it became the Immigration and Naturalization Service, and was transferred to the Department of Justice. At the start of the Great Depression, President Herbert Hoover addressed a joint session of Congress regarding the rapidly declining economy on December 2, 1930. One of his solutions was to further reduce visa availability to new immigrants and to more fully rid ourselves of criminal aliens, especially those in violation of immigration laws. The Mexican Repatriation was a coerced campaign that saw approximately 1 to 2 million people of Mexican descent, including roughly 60% U.S. citizens, deported or pressured into leaving the U.S. from Mexico during the Great Depression. Fueled by nativism and job scarcity, local, state, and federal officials used raids, threats, and fear to remove populations, causing immense hardship and breaking up families. Mass deportations were executed without due process. The primary goal was to reduce relief costs and scapegoat people of Mexican descent for the lack of jobs during the Great Depression, specifically targeting them to free up employment for white Americans. While some left voluntarily, many were coerced through forced deportations, threats from authorities, and organized repatriation trains arranged by local governments in cities like Los Angeles and Chicago. Many were either tricked or coerced into repatriation, and some U.S. citizens were deported simply on suspicion of being Mexican. Some who chose to return to Mexico received aid from Mexican consuls in the U.S. or ticket money from various aid organizations. Many other Mexicans made their own way to the southern border. Mexicans who returned home under these circumstances were considered voluntary repatriations because though they faced great pressures and sometimes actual threats from local authorities, they returned to Mexico outside of official federal removal proceedings. While many Mexicans left on their own accord, others were aided or pressured by state and local repatriation programs. By the early 1930s, local governments began to organize repatriation programs designed to remove Mexicans from their relief roles. The largest and most well-known of these efforts took place in Los Angeles, but several states and localities launched similar efforts. L.A. County hired trains and transported thousands of Mexicans to the Mexican border. Roughly 40% to 60% of those removed were birthright U.S. citizens. Families were torn apart, and many were forced into a country they did not know, resulting in a loss of property and generational wealth. The actions resulted in a decade of betrayal for the Mexican-American community, leaving a legacy of fear and a lasting economic impact, with many families struggling to return to the U.S. The campaign was not a single federal act, but a series of often illegal local and state actions that were supported by or overlooked by federal authorities. Extensive propaganda and media campaigns were used during the Mexican Repatriation to frame Mexicans and Mexican Americans as scapegoats for the Great Depression. Officials and media outlets spread rhetoric claiming Mexicans were stealing jobs, draining public resources, and that deporting them would open positions for needy white citizens. Politicians and public figures used slogans like "American jobs for real Americans," framing the removal of people of Mexican descent as necessary to preserve economic security for white citizens. Newspapers ran stories highlighting and sometimes fabricating the economic burden of Mexican immigrants, which normalized the idea of mass, forced removal. The campaigns were fueled by xenophobic nativist sentiment, targeting individuals based on their Mexican-sounding name rather than their legal status. Mexican repatriation involves brutal, often illegal tactics, including surprise raids on neighborhoods, parks, and workplaces. Tactics included midnight home invasions, terrorizing communities, coercing voluntary departures, and using local police for unlawful detentions. Mexican-looking individuals were targeted regardless of citizenship status. Local welfare agencies often targeted Mexican families, requiring proof of citizenship for aid and threatening deportation if they did not leave. Local governments used media to exaggerate deportation numbers, creating a sense of inevitability and fear that encouraged self-deportation. Officials used scare tactics, threatening raids and loss of relief benefits to coerce individuals into voluntary deportation. The early years of the Great Depression saw a massive exodus, as hundreds of thousands of Mexicans and Mexican Americans were compelled to leave the United States for Mexico, allegedly to reduce economic pressure on the government and create job openings for white America. Mexicans and Mexican Americans fought against repatriation by demanding formal deportation hearings to prove citizenship, organizing labor to secure employment, seeking assistance from the Mexican consulate, and in some cases fleeing to rural areas to escape urban raids. Despite these efforts, widespread coercion, and lack of legal defense, many resisted voluntary repatriation by refusing to sign documents, demanding official deportation warrants, and asserting their U.S. citizenship. Some, particularly in agricultural sectors, organized into unions or sought protection in government-run Farm Security Administration camps to maintain jobs. The farm workers who remained struggled to survive in desperate conditions. Bank foreclosures drove small farmers from their land, and large landholders cut back on their permanent workforce. As with many Southwestern farm families, a great number of Mexican-American farmers discovered they had to take on a migratory existence and traveled the highways in search of work. Families moved away from large cities like Los Angeles to smaller rural communities or remote areas to avoid local police, who conducted raids in neighborhoods and workplaces. Many people of Mexican descent, including U.S. citizens, died due to inhumane conditions during transport and in detention, as well as violence, threats, and disease. Survivors were forced to leave for Mexico. Many died from illnesses, sunstroke, and harsh conditions while being transported to Mexico. Even the elderly and sick were removed from hospitals and homes. Children faced extreme hardship, with many losing access to education, homes, and in some cases losing parents. White supremacy believes in targeting children. White supremacy believes in ethnic cleansing. White supremacy believes in breaking their own laws. White supremacy believes in stealing. White supremacy believes in cheating. You are dealing with subhumans. You are dealing with animals. You are dealing with the uncivilized. You are dealing with white devils. Our existence is resistance. White supremacy went on a campaign to get rid of our people. This is ethnic cleansing, American style. And this concludes for tonight's broadcast. Until next time, family, and always remember, those that fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it.